Welcome once again to 32 Thoughts, the podcast, presented as always by the GMC Canyon AT4X. Marek, Friedman, Elliotte, alongside Jason Bukala, Sam Cosentino. Elliotte is the yearly NHL 32 Thoughts draft preview. And on the last podcast, we talked about trade activity around the draft, how frisky is it, what the GMs are doing. But for the purposes of this show, we're going to drill down on the kids and drill down on the prospects, the stars of the show. So we'll throw this one out on the table, and whoever bites on this one. But is there a draft that you guys have either been part of or seen or thought about that this one compares to in terms of quality? I know it's hard because we're projecting out, and I get that. But does this draft remind you of any other drafts, or is it a standalone?
You want to answer that first? That's loaded for me because you know what? I've really been looking forward to this draft class, no question. I mean, it's a high-end group. I find that the talent at the top is exceptionally elite, and you can go back even in most recent years, and you can see some of the guys that are even on the wire sort of right now that they're talking that were high-end picks that are being floated out there to maybe be moving from one team to another, and that generally doesn't happen coming out of high-end drafts, right? This draft here, I love the depth of it. I love the high-end talent of it, but full disclosure, I find myself every year splitting hairs with the draft classes, and I really enjoy the kids every year. So I don't I don't project it to be that much different year over year. But the high-end guy, like when you get a generational talent and then you get the guy at 2 and the guy at 3, and, it starts to remind me back when we drafted Barkov in New Jersey back in the day when you had like McKinnon and Barkov, and, that group was supposed to be exceptionally
draft
elite.
was in New Jersey, not that New Jersey. People are going to be looking at their phone or their radio in their car and going to say, Barkov was drafted by New Jersey? You mean in New Jersey,
yeah.
Yes.
The marathon draft in New Jersey, as we recall. Remember coming out of, that was a lockout year, was it? Or strike? Remember, it was a one-day draft in New Jersey.
Yeah.
Guys had to grind it out. So I love the high-end talent, Sammy, but I'm not going to suggest that the depth isn't as good as other years.
It's unique for me for a couple of reasons. First of all, you have the generational thing with Bedard. Next, you have a lot of really high-end forwards who are a little bit on the smaller side. So you're talking about 6 foot or under, and you're talking about 165 pounds to 185 pounds. Now, of course, there's room for growth in those players, but typically when you talk about a draft class being so high-end, it's bigger guys. The other element for me that makes it unique is that we're probably looking at 3D that are going to go in the top half. Then there's a gap after that. And then it'll be a bit of a free-for-all for defensemen. Is it going to be, the Simashevs and the Bonks and those types of guys? So there's a lot of different elements to it. And I guess the last one I'd say that makes this unique is, even going back to last year, especially in the first round, the breadth of where the talent's coming from. Really good Russian players from Czechia. Slovaks are really good again. Canada, the U.S., Sweden had a great emergence, especially with what they did at the under-18s and losing in the final and overtime to the U.S. So you're seeing broadband breadth of talent, which I think is really cool. So in terms of the talent itself, I mean, it's so hard to project, but based on what we've seen and the people that we're talking to, everyone wants to compare this favorably to some of the best draft classes we ever have. It's so difficult to make that decision. For me, a lot of people are making it at 5 years out. For me, I think the real definition as to how high-end it is when you get to 3 years out. How many guys have played how many games? How many guys have had an impact, especially high in a lineup, top 6, top 4? And then you can make that determination. So guys are a lot more prepared now. They get there quicker. They're more prepared when they arrive. And so that 3-year window that used to be 5 for me is back to 3 to make that determination.
How many of these players that we're talking about here can walk into the NHL next season?
Do you think Bedard can?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I was not expecting you to answer that seriously.
Oh, breaking all the hearts in Regina, just like that. Oh, Pats fans, sorry.
Yeah. No, he's probably going to make it. Carlson could do it. Fantilli could do it. If you're looking at Will Smith, I don't think he's ready. I don't think Reinbacher's ready. Benson.
Leonard?
You'd have to go down the list. Leonard would be right on the edge for me. Leonard's going to get games. He'll get games this year.
Jason's nodding. You think Leonard?
Yeah, Leonard's one of my favorites. He's a bulldog, right? So it's more than just skill with him. We're talking about a 200-foot game and interior compete that I feel that no matter what level that kid plays next year, whether it be college or if he was a major junior guy, whatever, he's going to thrive. He's just one of those guys that's going to find a way earlier than later. So his floor, if you will, we already know what the ceiling could be, like we project the ceiling, but his floor, his entry-level floor is already ready to go. Like he could do it, in my estimation.
The Elliotte and I were talking about this on the podcast, that there's a Tkachuk factor, considering what Tkachuk did all season long and into the playoffs. Every manager is out there screaming, "Find me a Tkachuk, find me a Tkachuk, find me a Tkachuk." In this year's draft, it's Leonard. That's the guy, right? Like that's the, and because of that, do you wonder if he goes even higher than maybe projected? Because every team, like, listen, you guys know this. Everybody skates, everybody shoots. Like, skill is elite all around. What else can you give me? And Leonard gives you what a lot of other kids can't. Is that fair to say?
He gives you some of that it factor. When it comes to that element, and I heard you guys talking about it, like a Bertuzzi type of guy, where you're talking about Tkachuk light. I was just listening to you clowns on the way in here. So, and we're gonna go and find that guy. So he is probably the closest to that, in that he can skate. He's got really good skill, 50 goals type of guy. He can move pucks. He can get in the forecheck. He's got like that cockiness, arrogance, confidence, that he's in that tri-state area. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's cocky, sometimes it's arrogance, and sometimes it's just self-confidence. I think he sits in that tri-state zone. But I got to say, like, for Leonard, I've loved him since we went to Plymouth in November. I'm like, I love this guy. I've had him high up on my list all year. I think top six or seven. And I believe that he's going to have that type of impact. He can have it early on. So many factors go into that. Where you want to slot your guys, what you project for the future in terms of your salary cap and all those other things. I think all those things play a piece. But I think he could play next year. I think he'll get games.
The one thing I'll double down on there is he's not the type of player you have to insulate as much as some other guys earlier in their career because of the way he plays. Like Smith, if he plays next year, you have to insulate him because he's a motion guy. He's always in motion. He's not a stop and go guy, and he's always got the puck. He wants the puck on his stick, but he needs guys around him to do some of the other lifting. Where Leonard, you don't have to insulate him. Like, he can play a variety of roles. So it's that's what gives him a. That's why I say the floor is higher for him.
Yeah.
The ceiling could end up being higher for Smith. But full disclosure, like, I've got Leonard ahead of Smith on my draft list, right? And part of the reason is because I want to win games in April and May.
Everything. You come to a summer skate, you watch me get picked on, slashed, everything, and then I give it back, and then it's the end of the world. They kind of pick on me and kind of make me the competitor I am. Not only my brother, but the other pros out there. John's kind of the best. He's my biggest mentor and kind of my biggest role model in life. But yeah, I definitely wouldn't be the player I was this year or even next year without him.
Do you think most people I've talked to seem to think, and I'll get to Michkov in a second, but they seem to think that it will be some combination of Bedard, I'm doing it in alphabetical order.
You sure about him?
Yeah, I'm sure about him. Bedard, Carlson, Fantilli, Smith in the top four, and the draft really starts at 5. Do you guys agree with that?
I agree totally. Montreal's a bit of a wild card there.
But do you think those 4 guys will go 1, 2, 3, 4 in some order?
I think about Mike Greer, right? He's got Boston connections too. Will Smith's a Boston area guy. There's nothing really that you don't like about the player. I know you've had, in your deep dive, JB, you've had some concerns, but those, I think, are concerns that can be eradicated once you get to the pro level. Mm-hmm. But it's going to take a little bit of developmental time for that to happen. But I think connections rung strong. Like,
yes.
You're talking
you're
the background.
Millions.
Yeah.
You're betting millions.
You really got to do, it's not just, hey, what a great hockey player anymore. There's way more that goes into it than that. What was he like at the program? They're living with Will Vogt and Ryan Leonard in the same house, and Smith's mom's coming in to cook sometimes, and Vogt's mom's coming in to cook sometimes. And, none of the moms that they live with are going to throw the kid under the bus. So now you got to do a deeper dive. What's the equipment manager saying over at the U.S. Under-18 program? What are they saying back?
And he's a
you know,
hard guy
in
to get a
Boston?
hold of. They insulate that equipment guy at the program.
They do, eh?
Yeah.
So you guys are revealing your tricks. You're telling us the equipment guys are all your great sources.
If you want the real goods, you go to the equipment guy, the trainer. Absolutely.
believe that.
I used to be one, so I
Right,
know.
of course, yeah,
I know about it. And if
absolutely.
you, just on a sidebar, if you talk to Alex Anthopoulos, in his time with the Blue Jays, he would do a lot of work. He'd go talk to the visiting clubhouse guy, he'd talk to the home clubhouse guy, and they would, the trainers, how are people being treated? Are you A-Rod when there's a laundry basket right there and you drop your dirty clothes right beside it, or are you someone different than that? So I think that work's important.
It's funny you mentioned that to me because about things like that is I was talking to someone yesterday and they said there was a player who dropped in the draft a couple years ago because they were a leader on their junior team and there were a bunch of people at a game and his teammate there was a scrum in the corner and his teammate got knocked down and the guy skated right by it. And they said that player, there was a lot of people watching and that like those kinds of little things. And I'm like you. I'm a slobby person, but generally I prefer to clean up after myself when I'm in a work environment or something like that. I find those stories very interesting.
Ask the scout. Ask the scout when he goes to watch that stuff.
There's a prospect in this draft projected to go in the first round, and I was at 2 games this year in relatively empty arenas. At least where I was standing, it wasn't flush with a crowd. So 2 different occasions, not the first time. You go back the second time, as you know, Jeff, you don't want to see a guy one time on a weekend, go back. And I heard him bark out some horrible things to his teammates. He comes into our draft combine meeting and gloats about his leadership and team guy and all this other stuff. Of course, I don't propose the question because the form isn't, it's not proper. But I know what I heard. I know what I saw. And I think that's a wise message for people to listen, that scouts watch everything. The kid slamming his stick on the bench, the kid giving it to the coach, the kid yelling at his teammates,
Does he get bumped and run down the hallway?
And what Freeze just said, I mean, your guy's getting accosted and you're going to skate right by it. Like, come on.
Well, let me ask you this. If you're doing your NHL interviews, you're going right after that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm putting him on the spot for what I heard.
Not
once,
in the
but
media
twice.
Stuff that we're doing.
No.
It's a little
I don't want to kill
friendlier.
the kid, for sure.
Okay. We've gone, 15 minutes. We haven't mentioned Michkov yet. Marek threw out a scenario on the pod
Yes.
last week. He said that, you should explain it. Why am I talking for you?
Okay, so I got a note Tuesday morning from someone saying, I hated your take on I hated your take on Anaheim. And I said, why'd you hate my take on Anaheim? And he said, who's the general manager of the Anaheim Ducks? I said, Pat Verbeek. He said, where did Pat Verbeek come from? I said, the Detroit Red Wings. He said, who's the GM of the Detroit Red Wings? I said, Steve Yzerman. He said, he's been there with the guy that doesn't listen to anybody else. He makes up his mind. He doesn't get on the train tracks of what anyone else thinks or common wisdom or consensus feels that, and he makes his pick. And he said, it wouldn't surprise any of us if Pat Verbeek took Michkov at 2. Would that surprise either of you guys?
Yeah, it would surprise me. And I'm not, the premise I think is bang on, to be honest with you. I think that's exactly how Pat's going to run that franchise. He definitely wants to put his personality stamp on that group. I don't disagree with that but I also, where I'm torn with it is there's some unknowns, and Fantilli is a known. That's who I have it too. And by the way, Elliotte, I think the draft starts at 2, not 5, because the draft list will get, depending on who goes, 2, 3, 4. Like, trust me, there's going to be a lot of momentum there. So I would be surprised, but I see the reason why you're thinking that way and suggesting it, because I absolutely believe that Pat Verbeek, the little ball of hate, is going to put his own stamp. He's going to think He's going to think outside the box. Let's just say that. Like, he's not just going to go with the flow. So I see it. I don't see it happening, but I see the reasoning behind it.
Let's not overthink it. Stop it with that kind of talk. It would be my opinion. There are too many question marks.
Tell him. You tell him, Sam.
There's too many question marks. And yeah.
What are your
I get
major questions about Michkov?
it. You want to put your stamp. Well, there's a lot of questions. Are you really happy with the player when he doesn't have the puck? What he does defensively? Are you happy and convinced that he's a really good teammate? There's been a lot of question marks about that. You have to be more than concerned with the contract. The contract to me is the least of the worries. We've seen contracts be bought out and stopped earlier than they should have. That's the easiest part to figure it out. The next element is, as a young man who just lost his father.
Yeah, I think that can't be forgotten.
You can't forget it. And I hate talking about it. And I feel really bad for the kid because this is supposed to be the best year of your life. Where you're in your draft year, showing off your stuff. You're going head to head against Bedard, all these tournaments. And none of that really happened for him. So I really feel for the young man. But now you're in a situation where you're at home. You have a good contract. You still have, and forgive me, I don't know his sibling situation, but his mother's in the fold. You've lost your father, who he was very close with from everything that I can understand. And you're going to leave that situation. I would have a hard time thinking that that's going to be a possibility within the next couple of years. So getting back to trying to answer all those questions and trying to be the smartest guy in the room and try and put your stamp on the organization when you have an Adam Fantilli or a Leo Carlsson waiting right there, size down the middle of the ice, dynamic ability, especially when it comes to Fantilli, success right in front of your own eyes at the University of Michigan as a freshman, third guy to win the Hobie Baker Award. You have to ask yourself the question, are you really losing that much from a player perspective to not have to be concerned about all of the other elements that come along with drafting Matvei Michkov?
Okay, so keeping all of that in mind, Books, I want your thoughts on this too. Because we're looking at Michkov and we're saying, okay, that's going to be the guy where wherever he goes, we're going to have the gasp, right? That moment of the draft.
For sure.
We're going to have that. How far down does he get? And is there a line?
Who's taking him?
Washington.
Well, yeah. So
Now, does he get to 8?
Yes.
Well,
Jason's not so sure.
Good. I love it. Let's.
I'm not so sure.
Not only does he disagree with you, but he rolled his eyes at you. Which is always,
I think it's a tick. I think it was a tick because I don't roll my eyes at Sammy unless we're somewhere at 1:30 in the morning on the tour. Arizona is interesting. So let's start with Montreal. Okay. So for me, from my background, where I come from, you have to be very confident in your contractual situation, the support of your ownership group, the long road ahead, if you will. Okay, so if I'm a general manager and I've got a year plus left on my contract, it's going to take a lot of cajoolies for me to draft Michkov because I'm not likely going to see the player unless our team takes a leap and we have a lot of success. Okay, so that factors into the back of their mind, I believe. You know, they're all going to roll out there and say, "I want to do what's best for the organization," but we also know that they want to do what's best in the short order to build momentum for themselves. So I look at Montreal and they're flush with prospects, guys. We know that already, right? We also know that they're going to be there a while. Like, the management group, the team there, I believe they're going to be there a while. So you can take that risk because you don't have to have that player drop into your system tomorrow. Like, they can wait that out 3 years. I'm kind of curious on Arizona, and it's going to muddy the waters, but they have 6-12. Yep. Okay. And they have an absolute boatload of prospects. So they can wait forever on this guy. So from an asset management perspective, if you draft him and he never comes over to you and he's that elite in Europe, you move him later on.
Yeah, no, you know what? You make a great point. And I've said that too publicly before. With picks 6 and 12, you're still going to get a really good player at 12. Plus, they don't even have a home probably for 3 years. So
but
it does fit the timeline contractually for sure, and having to deal with the numerous issues that go along.
Yeah, I think you manage the asset that way. Like, I think it's a strategy that I would employ. I would at least think about it. Does he get past Washington though? I don't think so. As a matter of fact, the politics of the game will take over there. That kid will be over in Washington playing sooner than later because Ovi will be involved, and the people in Russia that the Capitals, they have a long history there. We all know that. He'll be over here sooner than later. That contract in Sky, I'm with you. It doesn't matter. Yeah. It won't matter for the right team. I shouldn't say that. It doesn't matter for the right team.
Yeah. But the other part of it that, think about Bill Armstrong, and you guys know him as probably better than both JB and I do. But you want to talk about a guy who walks around the room and is not afraid to do some things. he fits the profile for that too.
If in an equal world, if there were, if this was just based on talent and there were none of these other things that people had to consider, Jeff says Michkov goes 2. Do you guys agree?
If he's over
I
here,
am quoting you accurately.
That's fine.
right?
No, if you just look at skill.
Yeah.
And
no,
again,
if you best
you
player
watch these
available,
guys.
absolutely. Best for me, best player available. And sorry to interrupt, Sammy,
No,
but
please.
I want people to understand too. Like when we start hearing about, and I think everybody in this room recognizes that I speak to my people in Russia that I've worked with over the last 20 years or so as well, and you can't sometimes. Like where you come from in the world and the way that your personality makeup is and the type of person you are, it also is a byproduct of where you've grown up, okay? So like when you see a moody Russian player and you see that he's got to be broken here or he does this really well and, we have concerns about his character this way. The way that somebody in Russia views character of their own player compared to the way we look at it in North America, there's a difference.
For sure.
Okay?
Yep.
Culture has to enter into it. So then I double down on that and say he's 18 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I imagine everybody in this room when we were all 18 years old. Like, come on. So best player available, Michkov. He's over here playing for the London Knights last year. He's going number 2 for me.
I think 3 for me. I think Anaheim needs to address the center position and size. I mean, you saw what Ryan Getzlaf did for the organization. I think Fantilli can do a lot of those same things. I think their D is pretty much short up. All 3 CHL leagues defensemen of the year, and then Yarmo. I think he's a guy that he'd go down that road.
Let me pause on Columbus at 3 here because we've already talked about Verbeek and going his own way, doing his own thing. Yarmo has showed this how many different times, right? You remember the Buffalo draft with Pierre-Luc Dubois.
Mm-hmm.
This wouldn't be new territory for Kekalainen.
It wouldn't be, but he's been pretty public, and I don't think you go away from it saying he's going to take a center. So I think I'm gonna stick.
Is Anaheim making his pick for him?
Interesting, yeah. It could. I think so. I mean, Fantilli and Carlson are going to be the next 2 guys. I strongly believe that. So Anaheim makes the pick. They go Fantilli. Columbus goes Carlson. Vice versa.
Okay, who's your player drafted late that you're both looking at saying in 5 years, we're going to look at a player taken, I'm talking 3rd round or later, that makes an impact. And people are saying, why wasn't this guy taken earlier?
I got Kai Uchas, plays for the Red Deer Rebels.
Okay.
Former
Are you
first
trying
round.
to get like Ron McLean brownie points here, or what's the story?
Yeah, I'm trying. The Rebs. A former Seattle Thunderbird, got into some off-ice trouble there. It's been pretty public. You can look it up if you want. Got a second life, if you will, by being moved over to Red Deer. I think Steve Konowalchuk would have been familiar with the player. I think their times would have crossed from his Bantam draft year to when Steve was coaching Seattle and then moved to Red Deer. But 6'1", 190-pound center, 50 goals this year. It's hard to turn your back on someone who scores 50 goals, especially in the Western Hockey League. It was a really talented year this year. So he's gone through it a couple of times already. He's older, and you hope. Now, this is somewhat dependent on if you feel that he's done the work off ice, because you don't want to make that kind of mistake where you're bringing that person into your organization and all of a sudden that's where the attention goes, Mitchell Miller, and have to worry about that. But I have a lot of faith in Steve Konowalchuk, his ability to develop players, his ability to get players on the right track. And when I think about Kai Uchas coming into the league as a top Bantam pick, and a guy who scored 50 goals, and a guy who I think has grown up, he's a guy to me that people might be saying, plus at 6'1", 190, we've just seen what size can do in the playoffs. He's probably a guy that I think 5 years down the road, people might be saying, how did he get there?
Can I throw out two?
Sure.
Is this fine? So I think this kid's going to be a second round pick, but they're depending on how things fall, he might fall to the beginning of the third. Like Easton Cowan in London really impressed me in the second half of the season. Like really impressed me. Earn the trust. We've all been around the London Knights long enough to recognize that you have to earn the trust of the coach there, Dale, obviously. Yeah. He took off in the second half of the season, so it was a slow burn in the first half. More of a tenacious depth guy in their lineup. Come playoff time, the hardest time of year, a coach who values guys that go through the wall at the hardest time of the year. he elevated. He scored the majority of his goals in the back half, went to all the hard areas, played fast, played smart, was involved all the time. Really attractive elements to his game, and I think he's just starting to take off. The other guy I want to talk about, though, is out of Kingston, Quentin Burns.
Yes.
I love this kid. He's Radko Gudas, but he's not Radko Gudas heavy. Like, this guy is an absolute terror on the back end. Over 100 PIMs. Hard to play against, capable enough with the puck, but he never goes away. Like, Kalen Lynn might go in the second round out of Red Deer.
Yeah.
Okay. If some team drafts both these guys on the roster,
geez.
I'm going to tell you, it's a tire fire every time they're out there on the ice for the right reasons. Like, they are relentless. So I really like the way the kid plays. I get a chuckle sometimes, actually, because he's so aggressive. He needs weight. You know, he's not heavy enough right now to play the way he plays. But keep an eye on that name, because I think he's got a lot of momentum.
Can I throw one more at you?
Sure. And then I want to ask you about one player who I think might fit that criteria that Elliote's talking about. But go ahead.
Long, rangy, big, physical defenseman. Right. That's the talk of the town. That's
Vegas.
What we're
Vegas Golden Knights.
Terrell Goldsmith's a former Bantam first-round pick to Prince Albert, and he skates pretty well. But this guy's a nasty piece of business. 6'4", 223 pounds. D-man. I think he's going to get some love, but he's probably going to get like the Luke Shen thing, where, not saying where Luke was drafted 5th overall, but he goes late in the draft and he takes his 3 to 4 years to develop, and then he shows up, and he's probably a guy who's going to be able to extend his career because he can do the Good Branson thing. He can do the Luke Shen thing, where he'll be able to maintain his ability to keep the pace, play heavy, be relied on to play defensively, block shots. The one area of the game that he needs work on is his puck skills aren't great. And so that's an area that, you got to get that short up. You have to be able to get back, retrieve, move a puck quickly. So he'd be another guy at a Prince Albert that I'd be paying attention to. That'll go late in the draft. No one will even think about this guy. I think he had maybe 11 points this year that people are going to look at 10 years down the road and say, oh, wow, did we just get a first-round pick for Terrell Goldsmith?
I like his name. I love that name.
is a great name.
Can I just make a scouting statement on what we just talked about right there? And it's interesting. Every player that we talk about that has deficiencies moving the puck, guys that you're concerned about it. What I look for as a scout, anybody can move a puck on their forehand. Okay, you can go window and outboards and all. Like, it's a natural type thing. But NHL coaches and teams are calculating, and if they see a deficiency and they dump it to your corner as a defenseman, which makes you move a puck on your backhand side, and some of these kids, we've seen some, right?
You showed it to me.
We've seen some. That is something that when I talk about puck skill in the back end, I start to identify that, because there's a process there, and if you can't make a little chip play or a stick-to-stick on your backhand side under duress, because I know you can go window and out on your forehand side, then I really discount the prospect.
You know what, though? And that's hugely important. So I talked to Luke Shen at the end of the year, and he said Adam Oates saved his career.
Yeah.
Adam Oates simply saved his career. Hey, listen, at this age, you're not getting any faster. Your skating style is not going to change. What's going to change? Your ability to recognize how it is that you're going to have to move pucks. Yeah, I know you can play defense. I know you can fight, play heavy, do all that stuff. How is it that you're going to move the puck? And what's wrong? Oh, yeah, what's a great first pass? Is it a 5-foot pass to the guy who can move it a little quicker? Is it a bomb through the middle of the ice where you send someone a breakaway? So Luke really credits Oates for his ability his stick skills and puck moving skills to extend his career to now the point where he might be at a point where he signs 2 or 3 years making more money than he's made in the last 2 or 3 years. So I think that's important. But I also think that's an element that can be improved upon.
Let me pick up on, and again, this is using Elliotte Friedman's criteria of someone you're getting a little bit later that you look back and you say, whoa, I can't believe we got this guy. And we'll pick up on the theme of defensemen as well. Bo Akey of the Barrie Colts. Now, I had to take a little bit of a step back when Brant Clark came back to junior hockey, but do you put Bo Akey in that category?
So Bo Akey is an under-the-radar guy for me that you have to watch him very closely to appreciate all the little things that he does exceptionally well, and I mean exceptionally well. So I'll give you an example. I'm in a game in Hamilton, and the puck's, he's a right shot, right? So he's in the offensive zone, and the puck's in to his left side, and the play kind of moves over, and he cheats to the middle of the ice. right? But then it goes angle out, so chip to the neutral zone by Hamilton, and they're busting up the ice. And I can't remember the player. Let's just say Lardis, for example, because it was a burner, whoever was going. This kid, his ability, Jeff, to jump, pivot, uses agility to angle away space. He's got fantastic feet, like really good feet. So understated value in terms of being able to get from A to B very efficiently, very quickly. On the offensive side, he's a distributor more than a shooter. It's kind of muffins from distance for me, for him, okay? But I value this kid a lot. He was a riser on my draft list at the end of the year, more for all the little intangibles that I saw. And there's going to be some people that are going to say, well, he's not a great defender. He's not that. All I need him to do in his zone is get there quicker than the opponent. I don't even need him to bump that much. He can be an area defender, be active with your stick, but jump to it. Jump to it quicker than your opponent and move it somewhere. You know what I mean? Like move it somewhere. That's a good name to keep an eye on.
Yeah. Is he a second?
Well, he's
a late second.
He could go in the second. You know, I think that a lot of teams are going to shy away and think that he can't defend at the NHL level and that his element offensively isn't quite elite enough, okay, to run your first power play unit for sure or whatever. But don't discount it. I think this kid's...
You know what? There's good lessons there, though, because when Clark came back, he had to acquiesce. He was taking a lot of Clark's minutes before Clark came back. And oddly enough, Clark was a mentor to him. And some people are going to find that strange based on Brant's history. But a lot of growing up happened with LA this year, and I think that was super important. By all accounts, when he comes back to Barrie, he's locked in, he's focused. We know that the offensive production is there for Brant. But a guy who I think took the lessons of growing up and maturing quickly that he helped pass along to Bo, and that helped Bo get over the fact that he wasn't going to get all the primetime minutes because Brant was back. So it'll be interesting to see if teams take that as a positive, knowing that Brant's grown up a little bit, or a negative, knowing the history of Brant going back a couple years ago.
Okay, what team sets the draft on its ear? Either with a wild pick or a trade or something. Who's the team you're watching to drop the biggest bomb?
Well, a couple teams for me. I think the Winnipeg Jets, we have to keep an eye on them. I just think that not even, reading things or anything. My gut tells me that NHL group is in flux. And what that's going to mean is that they're going to have to start to develop another layer. Like the thing with the Winnipeg Jets guys is that they need to draft and develop. And they have to hope the kids stay there, right? You know, they're not a high-end destination for free agents. So when you get the Hellebucks of the world and some of these guys who are entering, whatever their status is as free agents in short order, I think that they're going to be aggressive, and that could change the trajectory of their group, not at the NHL level necessarily. I think they want to retool, but the underbelly. I think that there could be some momentum there. The other one I'm going to be interested in, they got a lot of picks, is Nashville. Like, I think Trotzy coming in, I have a history in Nashville when I was first there, and we had a lot of they drafted great. Jeff Kelty and those guys have done a fantastic job there. But I think that if they were to look in the rearview mirror, they would say that we took some safer picks over the years than we took good NHL players. I'll go back to the floor.
You always drafted from the West. It was like, okay, best player available from the Western Hockey League.
Well,
that was what we used to always say about Nashville.
Could have been made too that we never. Sometimes we didn't draft the best player, but it was like again, I go back to that floor scenario. Like guys that were going to be steady Eddies, right?
Yeah. Sissons, he'd be one in that group.
Oh, the Dan Hamuses of the world had great careers. There's a bunch of guys there, and then in that they did a nice job. Like Pekka Rinne was obviously a 9th round pick. This is going back. I don't want to bore everybody here, but I mean, it took him forever. That's 2 contracts, two deals to get to the NHL.
Yeah.
Nashville, keep an eye on them. They got 2 firsts. They got, I think they have the most picks in the draft. 13 picks in the draft. And I know that Trotzy's indicated to that group that he wants to take more risk, get more aggressive. So that'll be interesting. I'm looking at Perreault in the first round potentially to Nash Vegas. Where are they, 17 or something like that?
Yeah, that's
17, 18 somewhere. Seems like that's in his range.
Yeah,
and they love going to the program. They love going to the players.
Yeah, I think St. Louis is the team. I think Doug Armstrong is just looking at this thing and saying, "I hated to do what I had to do the last couple of years."
Hang on, you think he's making all 3 picks?
No chance. No chance. He'll be moving and grooving for sure. So I think he's 10, 25, 28, somewhere, something like that.
Yeah.
So the 10th, I'm quite certain he's going to keep.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if adding those other two would bump him up any further if he was really excited about, a player inside that top 5 or 6. But I think they're going to be an interesting team to watch. And Montreal, like, they think outside the box. You think about that deal they swung last year to get Kirby Dach. I think they're at a point now where their prospect pool is good. Ownership has a lot of confidence in the program, the Gorton Hughes program. And they have, I think, a pick that people are going to be really dying to get to once they see what happens with the 4 picks in front of them. So I think there could be some action there with Montreal. And again, they think outside the box. They're not afraid to take a shot at the title. They know that they've got guys coming, and they have confidence in ownership.
The one team that, and I'll talk for you here, Elliotte, the one team that we've been talking a lot about as being a team to watch at the draft is Philadelphia. With Daniel Briere, we all know who's available. We all know what Briere and Jones want to do here with this thing, and they're looking to build up that pipeline. Could they be the ones, in your estimation? I mean, last year was Cutter Gauthier, we're moving on. What about this year, though? Like, this year is the first year where they've really said, we're going for it. We're not afraid to use the R word, rebuild, and this is how we're going to do it.
Yeah, I think that they're definitely a team that, for the first time in my career, they're in that mode. Like, forever, it's always been Philadelphia's going to challenge to do something, right? Like, they just had, like, going back to the Snyder days and whatever. And I'm lukewarm on some of the noise out there. Like, if I'm part of Philadelphia's brass, I'm not really looking to trade a Konechny. Like, I'm not looking to do some of these things. So they're caught in the muddy middle. It's interesting the guys they're bringing in as advisors, right? So I think that it's going to be fascinating to see where they go. I'd be making the pick. Not trading the pick and looking to acquire more picks. I think they will. They desperately need to get some traction coming through the system. So it's interesting, and it's going to be fascinating in the next couple of years too to see when the honeymoon stage wears off for Briere and his group, because Philly's Philly.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, the tough decisions, like Lawton is a good player. Any team would take Scott Lawton right now at the price he's at, the deal he's on. Yep. Any team would take him. So I think he's going to be a coveted guy, and probably this year more so than ever when you expect the cap to go up next year and teams are looking to fit those Barbashev type of guys into your lineup. And Konechny is a really interesting guy too. I think he has an opportunity to really flourish under Tortorella. I think there were some really hard lessons learned last year, but I think he's a guy you want to be careful about moving to, because maybe given a new situation, a fresh situation, maybe he's the type of guy that ends up going off for some teams.
I would say Carter Hart's the guy though. Like, it's going to be what they do in net, right? And I know there's a lot of moving parts there. There's a lot of stuff going on, but whatever they decide to do with that situation is going to be interesting, because that will bring back some draft capital for them.
All 3 of those guys, I think, bring back a lot of.
But then the waiting game starts. So the one thing I would say too is that in the first round, guys, there's a lot of European players, and there's some college players, but there's or guys going to college even. So the timeline for arrival is different, right? So you're drafting the Swede, and you're looking at, like,
you get 4 years.
4 years.
Yep.
You're drafting a college guy. There's a little bit of risk reward in there. Timeline's different than a CHL player, as we all know. So you have to factor that in. Like, you want to get the best player, but we also don't want to be terrible for too long. And then the last thing I'll say with that is that next year's draft looks really good too. So,
but it's funny, because if he walks in there and says, "Yeah, I like a lot of our pieces. Look what just happened with Florida. They snuck in the last couple of days." Maybe we can be that team in the East this year.
The reason why, and again, like Elliotte and I have talked about this plenty, the reason why I'm really, as confident as you can be before the first round of the draft, where anything can really happen, about the Philadelphia Flyers really trying to add as many picks as possible. Before he was named interim general manager, Daniel Briere was scouting.
He's everywhere.
He was on you saw him plenty, right? Yeah. Like, the day before he was named, he was in Barrie. scouting on a scouting trip. So he's spent a lot of time all season on the road looking at a lot of guys. This isn't a situation where the GM shows up and has maybe seen the kids once or twice. This is someone that's seen a lot of these kids for a couple of years too, like even going back to last season.
That's really important. That's like, trust me, that's really important, because I've been in rooms where the GM has come in later on, or where there's been things in flux, and it's really dangerous when they think they know, but they don't know the entire landscape. It's a dangerous proposition to be in. So he's been everywhere.
Yeah. Let me ask you about an NHL player, but I want to ask what you thought of him in his draft year. So the Vegas Golden Knights win the Stanley Cup. There's one drafted and developed player on that team, and it's Nick Hague. The defenseman played with James Richmond with the Steelheads. What did you think of him then? He was a second-round pick of Vegas. What did you think of him then, and did you think that he would get to this place right now as a Stanley Cup champion?
I did. If I go back, I might have had him in my first round. Mississauga's pretty close for me to get to go see games. And one thing that really struck, I brought my son one afternoon, and he was engaged. Hey, do you want a stick? Here's a puck. You want pictures? Whatever you need. Like, I thought that was really cool that he kind of took that. Got to know his dad a little bit. Saw him in Jersey earlier this year. And listen to Jeff Krzakos, the assistant coach there, to James Richmond, and both of those guys were like, "Oh yeah, he's going to be a really, really good NHL player." So the size right away is going to click. He's going to play somewhere at some point. But the identification for him having the Hager bomb, his big shot from the point, that hasn't left him at all. Bomb. And like the idea that he was going to be able to defend with some nastiness. Stick up for teammates. There was a lot of things about Nick Hague that I liked, and honestly, I'd have to go back. I might have had him in my first round mock, so not completely surprised. But a lot of it for me is based on person. I say this to JB all the time. Like, I love when we get out to watch games together because, hey, did you see that guy in the back? And you see what happened? And I'm sitting there. I'm like, no, what do you mean? Oh yeah, he just turned to the middle and then he flipped this puck over, and he recognized the line change. I'm like, whoa, how the hell do you process all that? And I'm like, no, but I saw him before the game, and he came over and he said hello, or he was locked in and dialed in. So we have that kind of the yin and the yang thing going on when it comes to evaluating. But for me,
good cop, bad cop. He's the good cop by far.
I lean heavily on person and personality, because that to me says I'm going to work hard to get better. I'm going to be a good teammate, and I'm going to accept whatever role is given to me and try and improve upon that role. And I saw all those things with Nick.
It's funny, Brian Burke told us this a number of different times when he's going into the draft. He says, the first thing I do is I identify with my eyes, and then I check with the analytics to make sure my eyes aren't lying to me, and then I meet the family. Mm-hmm. And he's equal value on all of them, to your point, Sammy.
So I got to give you a Nick Hague, just so we're on the same page here. The beautiful thing about what they do in Mississauga with James Richmond is that he is one of the I don't want to say he's an outside the box thinker, but he appreciates input from the NHL community with the prospects that have already been drafted. We had intel on Hague because we had drafted Tippett out of there. Right. And so
this is with Florida, just so our listeners know, this is with the Florida Panthers.
Florida Panthers. Yeah, okay. And so Brian McCabe was our director of player personnel, but he would obviously make the tour, and he would go on the ice with Mississauga, with the Steelheads, and practice with them, and run drills with them and stuff like that. So it was easy for me to ask an ex-Toronto Maple Leaf defenseman what he thought of Hague, because he saw him live and he could see his practice habits and all these things. So I always liked Hague.
Was the intel good coming back?
It's great. Yeah. It's great because he's a handler. Like there's guys that came through the league at that time, the Logan Stanleys and that were big bodies, but they were Nick Hague always had the puck on his stick. He's making plays. Yeah. He could rush the puck. He can make little plays. He's long, right? But he can make plays in the offensive blue line, and I'm not the least bit surprised. He's got a little bit of nasty. He's got offense. He's got it all. That kid is going to make a lot of money, have a long career.
Oh yeah.
Last one for me, and this is for you, Jason. Biggest fight you ever saw at a draft table, whether your team or someone else's?
Oh, goodness. This is going way back. This was a war in Nashville, the Columbus draft. Gord Donnelly. I don't know if you remember Gordy. Okay.
Well, I bet you he won a lot of those arguments. Got a lot of penalty minutes.
Let's just say he was the table above his kneecaps was shaking. It was reverberating. Like it was intense. But for whatever reason, Paul Fenton and Jeff Kelty absolutely had a disdain for PK Subban at the time. And we're at our May meetings in Nashville, and they had him in the 6th round. And we're like, this can't be. And Gordy and I are going at him a little bit, and Jeff was not happy with us, definitely not happy with us. But we didn't want to give it up. So we get to Columbus, and I think we got him to the 4th round by the end of the May meeting. And by the time we were in Columbus, we might have marginally got him up to like the late 3rd or the 4th. And then we tapped out. We did everything. It was like razor blades on a chalkboard. Like we tried everything, but they weren't buying in. And then of course
they traded for him
years later.
Which was much more costly.
Much more costly. I got to give you another one real quick though.
Yeah.
Jake Muzzin. We brought Jake Muzzin to camp in Nashville back in the day as a free agent, Joe Resnick client. And he was coming off back surgery when we had him. I was in the Sioux originally with Jake, so there's a history there. And we brought him to camp as a free agent. Pittsburgh didn't sign him, right? And we went on the road to Atlanta for some exhibition games, and we had our staff meeting after. And I said, "We got to sign this guy," And I was an entry level guy. I was still a puppy, right? But I was pretty aggressive about it, and they came up with every reason not to sign him, including this back injury. And Jake would have signed, like he wanted to sign. He had a heck of a training camp, and then. The rest is history. What a great career he's had.
I love those stories, especially the ones that work out. All right, last one to you then, Sam. Going to give you a chance to shine your own apple here a little bit. Who was, in your history of making mock drafts, who was the one that you really stuck your neck out on and with and were right?
Connor McDavid.
You got it again. Pierre-Luc Dubois. I had him going 3rd, and I'm not on social media, but sometimes the comments after the mock draft, I think Sportsnet allows some of that stuff to happen. So I looked through.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, I looked through some of that, which I honestly, I never, ever look at that stuff.
Yeah.
But for that reason, I thought, well, this is a little polarizing. Let me just see what happens here. We're working with John Shannon. We're in the combine, and we're in the interview room. We get access to the players to do our interviews. And Jarmo, for whatever reason, he came into the room to do an interview too. And now we're off camera, off mic, and John has a bit of a history with him, and we're talking, and I'm not saying anything. I never met the guy before other than to shake his hand. So I'm just listening. I'm observing. And I just got the sense that Laine wasn't going to be his cup of tea. And I thought, all right, well, I know Dubois really well. Like I did a lot of games in Cape Breton and watched them and followed him. And I knew he could fight. He could play the wing. He could play center. He could shoot. Like he could do a lot of things. And I thought all those things were translatable. So, he was still going to go in the top 10, but putting him at 3 in the mock draft is probably the one that I remember the most.
That was a home run pick. I know that was a big peacock moment for you.
He's about to get paid.
And Laine's in Columbus now.
Yeah. I'll go figure, right?
Yeah.
I'd like about 10% on his next deal.
Guys, it's been great. Very much look forward to the draft in Nashville and seeing you both there as part of our
working
coverage.
together again.
Right?
The one time a year.
The band is back together in Nashville. Thanks, gentlemen.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.